Hello and good evening, everybody. My name is Gina Murdock, and on behalf of my husband Jerry and I, we are so pleased to welcome you here to the third Murdock Mind, Body, Spirit series this summer. We recently hosted Dr. Helen Fisher talking about sex. Dr. Hyman, I'm sorry, it's very hard to beat that subject. That was a sold-out crowd. We talked to Daniel Pink about the art of perfect timing, another wonderful talk. Tonight, I know many of you are probably here because you see that Dr. Hyman is in conversation with Jerry Murdock, the co-founder of Insight Venture Partners. But Mark is going to interview himself tonight, is that correct? So a change in programming, if you want to leave, now would be the time. So I hold in my hand a tool, something that is the most powerful tool for your health and to change the world. That is, my friends, a fork. And if you go on Dr. Hyman's website, you will see that statement, and you will know, if you know him through his podcast or one of his 11 best-selling books, that he is all about the power of the fork. Tonight, as we honor the Aspen idea through our series, the Mind, Body, Spirit series, we will be talking about the future of personalized health and longevity with Dr. Mark Hyman, 11-time New York Times bestselling author, Pritzker Foundation Chair in Functional Medicine at the Cleveland Clinic Lerner College of Medicine, Director of the Cleveland Clinic Center for Functional Medicine, and in addition to educating through his books, his podcast is a great resource on a variety of topics on what to eat, dealing with social issues like loneliness, issues of climate change. The depth he brings to these topics makes listening to him time well spent. He'll be signing books after the talk in the lobby. The newest book is Food, What the Heck Should I Eat? And then he just shared that cookbook's coming out, which is Food, What the Heck Should I Cook? Is that correct? Most importantly, Dr. Mark Hyman gave his wife, for a present, a small box. And inside the box, when she thought the box was the present, he said, "No, that's not the present. I'm going to put my phone in the box for the weekend or sometimes." And I wanted to share that story because that is very, very important. And I'm so proud of you, and I really admire that. So please join me in welcoming this wonderful, phenomenal speaker, Dr. Mark Hyman.
Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for showing up. I'm very excited to be here talking to you because I'm going to hopefully bring to light what I believe is a radical transformation thinking about medicine, healthcare, and food. Now, people are confused about food. In fact, when I was walking in, someone interrupted me and said, "Aren't you that doctor I see on TV talking about nutrition?" And I said, "Yeah." They said, "Well, I came from out of town, and my doctor told me to take B12, but I have B6. Can I take 2 of them?" So hopefully we're going to break some of the confusion up. Now, some of what I'm going to talk about, a little bit depressing, but also very hopeful. And it really has to do with this crisis we're now of our thinking about healthcare and our bigger crisis around food, which I really am not going to talk that much about tonight, a little bit, because I've written a new book called Food Fix about the future of food and the need to rethink our approach to food and agriculture, because it's the biggest driver of some of the most important things we're facing today, which is our chronic healthcare and chronic disease crisis, our economy, climate change, environment, social justice, national security, and lots more. But let's just dive into talking about the big picture of a radical transformation that's happening in science and medicine today that's bigger than anything I think that's happened in the last 100 years except the internet. And the reason I say that is because, it's a phenomenal paradigm shift that most people aren't accessing, most people don't have the privilege of getting, and it's necessary because without it, we're not going to be able to solve our chronic health issues. Now, we see in America today, 1 out of 2 Americans has a chronic illness. We see 1 in 2 people actually have prediabetes or diabetes. 70% of us are overweight. These diseases are creating a huge burden on caregivers and people. Probably many of you in this room have some form of chronic disease, whether it's high blood pressure or heart disease or cancer or have had it. And we see this is exploding. Just since I graduated from medical school, in 1990, we've seen an explosion of obesity and diabetes in America that's unprecedented. When I went to medical school, there was not a single state, back to the state here, there wasn't a single state that had an obesity rate over 20%. Now many states are pushing 40%. And it's often worse in the South, and it's just incredible. Now, the costs of this are staggering. Over the next 35 years, it's going to cost $95 trillion to address chronic disease in this country. That's just in America, both direct and indirect costs. That's $3.1 trillion a year, which is, in putting in perspective, our entire federal tax revenue is $3.8 trillion. This is an enormous amount of money that we're, in fact, spending unnecessarily. So we need to rethink the whole paradigm of why people get sick and how they can get better and how they can live vibrant, healthy, long lives. My goal is to die young as late as possible. And that's what I want for all of you. And following this methodology, which is essentially not about so much disease as about the science of creating health, I believe we can all do that. Now, the problem we're in has to do with a paradigm that was launched by Louis Pasteur, who discovered the bacteria as the cause of pneumonia. And then Fleming discovered penicillin, which then cured the pneumonia. And so you had this concept of a single agent causing a single disease cured by a single drug, which is what we've been chasing ever since. And it works for infectious disease, but it does not work for chronic disease because you don't catch diabetes or you don't catch cancer or Alzheimer's. And there is no drug that's going to cure Alzheimer's. I got bad news for you, but there are ways to actually reverse it. We're going to share a little bit more about that because we aren't looking at things in the right way. And part of the problem is this classification of disease that we developed to put people in categories. So all of medicine now is siloed. It's all these organ systems. We're all categorizing by symptoms and geography. Where is it in your body and what is a symptom? So unfortunately, that's not how the body's organized, and yet that's how we've organized medicine. So you go to the cardiologist, the rheumatologist, the dermatologist, the psychiatrist, but maybe all those problems you have are connected. I recently saw a patient who had a whole host of problems. She had psoriasis and psoriatic arthritis. She was on a drug that cost $50,000 a year to suppress that. She had prediabetes. She had depression. She had severe reflux and irritable bowel. And she was about a 50-year-old woman who was really struggling with her life. And within 6 weeks, all that went away. She got off all of her medications simply by getting to the root cause. So functional medicine is about getting to the root cause, about treating the system and not the symptoms, and forgetting about all these labels because they don't really help you other than finding the drug for that label, the pill for every ill. And the paradigm shift that I'm proposing that's happening today in medicine is as big a paradigm shift as happened when Columbus said the earth is not flat, or Galileo said that the earth is not the center of the universe, or Darwin said that species don't show up fixed in their form that they have now, that they evolve over natural selection. And Einstein still is hard to grasp his concepts, which is that the stage I'm standing on is mostly empty space and time is not linear and things that are still hard for us to grasp. These are massive paradigm shifts in science, and this is exactly one of them. So the paradigm shift is that diseases, as we think of them, don't exist. They're simply categories we give to people or names we give to people who have certain symptoms, but doesn't tell you why. It doesn't tell you what's really going on in the system. And Jerry was telling about the Santa Fe Institute, which is learning about systems and complex adaptive systems. That's what the body is. It's a series of biological networks, not a bunch of different organs. And when we think about treating people by optimizing the function of those organs, systems, and the functional networks, that's when you create health. So functional medicine is the science of creating health. And now we're learning concepts that are blowing up our ideas of what's going on in medicine. For example, inflammation is a core concept that now is linked to almost everything, from depression, which is inflammation in the brain, or autism, to obviously the autoimmune and allergy diseases which are exploding, to cancer, to heart disease, to diabetes, to obesity. These are all inflammatory diseases. So maybe instead of being a cardiologist or a neurologist, I should be an inflammologist, right? And that's exactly what the future is. The microbiome you might have heard about. A lot of the inflammation is coming from the microbiome. We've destroyed our gut flora through the overuse of antibiotics in medicine, in agriculture, through increasing C-section rates, through the poor quality of our food, through things like glyphosate, which is in all of the food we eat, which really destroys our microbiome. And we have to understand that this is connected to, again, so many diseases, whether it's depression or cancer or heart disease or diabetes or obesity or autism. the microbiome plays a huge role, and most of us have no idea how to fix our inner garden or take care of our microbiome. Most of us, treat it as if it's just a thing we don't have to worry about, but it actually is the most central thing to creating health, and we'll talk about that. Mitochondria is another concept about energy. How do we make energy? I mean, how do you do anything you do? You breathe and you eat, and that combusts in these little mitochondria, these little sort of powerhouses of your cells that produce energy that run your body. And when they stop working, you die. And this is really the fundamental process of aging, is the decay and dysfunction of the mitochondria. And a lot of the science of functional medicine is about how do you optimize your mitochondria, which can help prevent disease. For example, Parkinson's is a mitochondrial disease. And I was talking to one of my patients yesterday. After 10 years, his neurologist said he's never seen a case like this. It hasn't progressed, where the patient's gotten better, or he's highly functional, he's very active, and on very little medication, because we optimize the mitochondria. Environmental toxins, again, are ubiquitous. We're exposed to over 80,000 chemicals in the environment that were non-existent 100 years ago, whether it's heavy metals or pesticides. The average newborn is born with 287 chemicals in their umbilical cord blood before they took their first breath, from pesticides to PCBs to phthalates to glyphosate to flame retardants to heavy metals. It's all of these things are affecting our biology, and we need to think about maybe how to be toxicologists or mitochondrial experts or microbiome experts or inflammologists. This is what functional medicine is. That's what we do. And it's sort of moving into this era of personalized medicine. You've heard about personalized medicine, precision medicine, personalized health maybe. But most of that is really targeted at looking at what is the drug that I can use to match that person's genes. Not really a holistic view of how do you create precision health. What is your unique biology, your unique genetics, and how do we work with that? And most of the drugs we take are not that effective. Unfortunately, if you look, for example, at Crestor, you have to treat a whole bunch of people to get any benefit for one person. Same thing with Advair or the multiple sclerosis drugs or other drugs for blood count and so forth. For Nexium, you treat lots of people just to actually get one person better. That's not a very effective drug. If I give you a bladder infection, if you had a bladder infection and you took an antibiotic, you hope it works the first time. Maybe it's resistant and it'll work the second time. But if I give you a drug, it only worked 1 in 50 times in 1 in 50 patients, that's not a good drug. So the future of medicine is connecting the dots. It's putting all these things together in a new story that allows us to really think differently about disease. And so the question is, what is functional medicine? It's a new way of thinking. It's not a specialty, a modality, a test, a supplement. It's a new way of thinking about the origins of disease, about the body as a biological system. And it uses these concepts of network medicine. So network medicine is an emerging idea that's coming out of major academic centers. This is a textbook that's written from Harvard. And this is a map of, for example, the metabolic networks that underlie the disease networks that then cause disease in humans, but also the social networks are connected. And we'll talk about that later. So we have this really reframing of disease. And I'm just going to read you this quote because it just speaks to how we think about functional medicine. So functional medicine sort of evolved on the outskirts of medicine, but now it's coming inside the center. Network medicine embraces the complexity of the multifactorial influences on disease. So in other words, it's not just one thing, like one bacteria. It's many things. It's your diet, it's stress, it's genes, it's toxins, it's allergens, it's microbes. All those things are affecting you. It's your lifestyle. All those things are affecting your biology. While network medicine offers a fundamentally different approach toward understanding disease etiology, meaning the cause, it will eventually lead to key differences in how diseases are treated with multiple molecular targets that may require manipulation in a coordinated, dynamic fashion. What that means is we're going to be using a lot of different things to help optimize the person, right? If you have a disease, you just can't expect to take one drug and have it be cured. You have to figure out how to create health, and that's what functional medicine is. So is it the environment? Is it genes? Craig Venter and I have been on panels together. He's a brilliant guy, decoded the human genome. His view is that it's 99% genes, and I have a strong opinion that it's not 100% genes. It's not just my opinion, that really is related to the data. So, for example, is it nature or nurture, right? These were the Pima Indians who lived not too far from here 100 years ago. Now this is what they look like. Is it genes or environment, right? Is it genes or environment? 100 years ago in Johns Hopkins, William Ulcer was like, hey, there's a heart attack. Let everybody come and see this is a rare disease. How did we go from it being a rare disease to being the #1 killer? It's not because our genes have changed. It's because our environment has changed. And there's also this thing happening in medicine called the convergence, which is all these different evolutions of science and data and and other aspects of medicine are coming together to reframe the way we're going to be looking at disease. One is the omics revolution, which includes the genome and the microbiome and all the omics. The quantified self, we're going to be measuring all of our biometrics. I've got my Apple Watch on, which measures a lot of things, where it's going to be even more advanced. We have big data, which now can crunch enormous amounts of information and connect patterns that we never knew before. And we have the idea of network medicine to reframe the thinking and the analysis. And of course, we have artificial intelligence and machine learning, which will help us put it all together. So all these trends are coming together that is going to revolutionize how you think about your own biology, how doctors practice medicine. But it's very tough. It's very tough to change. It can take decades. And the exposome is essentially all the influences that are that you're exposed to that are influencing your gene expression. So it turns out that 90% of chronic disease is caused by the influence of your life washing over your genes every minute. What you eat, what you think, your relationships, your exercise, toxins, allergens, all that is washing over your genes, creating the expression in this moment. Your genes aren't fixed, right? You have a predisposition, but not a predestiny. So the Pima Indians had a predisposition to obesity and diabetes. Now, 80% of them are diabetic by the time they're 30, but they didn't have a predestiny. So this woman, was a patient. She came in and she had many issues. She was fatigued. She was about 65 years old. She had weight issues. She was pre-diabetic. She had arthritis. She had gut issues. And I simply put her on a 6-week program to help create health. I wasn't treating diseases. I wasn't treating symptoms. I used the basic principles of functional medicine, and this is what she was 6 weeks later. Of course, her husband was on the 6-month program, which is a little bit tricky. You got to be careful. So we need a new GPS. We need a new map, a roadmap, because the way we're navigating around disease just doesn't make sense anymore. When you look at work, for example, at Stan Hazen, looking at the microbiome on heart disease, what cardiologist is asking you about your digestion or your gut or testing your stool, right? Nobody. But it needs to happen. And this is the map we use in functional medicine, which understands that there are basic functional biological networks that explain all disease. Now, this is sort of an approximation. The Buddha said, don't mistake the finger pointing to the moon for the moon itself. This is the finger pointing to trying to map out what we know today in science are the fundamental biological networks that are all interacting to create healthy disease, and they have to be in balance. You have to take off the stuff that's causing imbalance, and you have to put in the stuff that creates balance, and that's really the fundamental concept. So you look at your predisposing factors and your genetics and so forth, various insults, triggers, traumas, lifestyle factors. These all influence these functional systems. Your gut and assimilation, your defense is your immune system, energy is the mitochondria, biotransformation is the toxins, transport is the circulation and lymphatic, communication is all the hormones, endocrine system and the neurotransmitters and so forth, and structural system is all the way from your biomechanical structure down to your cell membranes. All these have to be working well for you to be healthy. And as a functional medicine doctor, when I see a patient, I put whatever symptoms, diseases, lab tests, anything on here and create a map. So I work with everybody who's literally next to death or has early Alzheimer's to elite athletes, who are top tennis players and football players. And we just started working with the Real Madrid players to optimize their health. And these are super athletes, super fit, but you can still use this methodology to find out what's out of balance. And I learned this because I was sick. This is me about, 25 years ago. And I was really unhealthy. I got really sick from being in China, and mercury poisoning really destroyed my health. And it took me a long time to figure it out. And through basically reverse engineering what happened to me, understanding these systems, I was able to get better. And of course, this is me now. And it wasn't just the mustache that was the problem. Now, this is a little girl, Isabelle, who came to see me. She was 10 years old. She loved riding horses, but couldn't ride. She had severe autoimmune disease. So it was called mixed connective tissue, but she had dermatitis, she had arthritis, she had hepatitis, her liver was inflamed, her muscles were inflamed, she had myositis. She pretty much had every kind of itis you can imagine. And her story was that she ate a lot of tuna, which is interesting. And she had lots of antibiotics, destroyed her gut, and her diet was pretty bad. She had lots of sugar and dairy. And we found she had lots of elevated autoimmune antibodies, she had lots of muscle damage, liver damage, she had anemia, lots of inflammatory markers, and low vitamin D. That's sort of the conventional test. So then we we saw what she was doing, they were giving her basically horse doses of steroids intravenously every 3 weeks. They were giving her a chemo med called methotrexate to suppress her immune system. On top of that, she was getting prednisone and an acid blocker and blood pressure meds to actually dilate her blood vessels because her blood vessels were inflamed, and aspirin because she was clotting because all the inflammation was causing clotting. So this is what she was traditionally treated by at 10 years old, and there was no way out. The next step was a drug that was going to suppress her immune system even more. And when I looked, she had gluten antibodies. What was she eating? She had gut inflammation. Her microbiome was off, and she had heavy metals. So she had foods that she was reacting to that was pissing off her immune system. Her gut was inflamed because of all the things she'd done to it. And she had high mercury, which also can disturb the gut. So we just simply cleaned up her diet. We cleaned up her gut. We gave her some basic nutritional support and vitamin D, and we helped her body get rid of the metals. And 2 months later, her symptoms were gone. Her labs were better. A year later, symptoms completely gone, off all meds. And all her labs, which, by the way, never get better in these patients, were all normal. And this is her with her horse 2 months later. And this is her telling her a little bit of her story. If you watch carefully, you can see she's got this writing on her hand because she didn't know what she was going to say, sort of like the Sarah Palin effect. Anyway, here she goes.
I have mixed connective tissue disease. And my first treatment was I was on high doses of solumedrol, methotrexate, and prednisone. My face swelled up like a grapefruit. Then I went to go see Dr. Hyman. He put me on a gluten-free, sugar-free, dairy-free diet and supplements. And now, a year and a half later, I can ride my horse, I can show I'm off of all those stupid medications, and I feel great.
Now, I just talked to her a little while ago, and this is like 10 years later, and she's still doing great. She's still doing great. This is a little boy. We have a lot of brain disorders in this country. We have depression, anxiety, suicide, violence. I mean, the amount of just divisiveness, not to mention things like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, neurodegenerative diseases are on the rise. And the question is, why are our brains not working? I produced two different documentary series called Broken Brain about this and looking at novel ways of thinking about it. But this kid pretty much had everything going on. Not only was he behaviorally disruptive and had severe ADHD, he was kicked out of kindergarten, but he had all these other things that didn't seem relevant to a psychiatrist, like asthma and irritable bowel and anxiety and hives and muscle cramps and all kinds of different symptoms that were all inflammatory. His brain was inflamed. It wasn't working. And so, I wrote a book about 10 years ago called The Ultramind Solution about how the body affects the brain. So we're treating psychiatry now with medications as if, this is, or therapy as if it's just all in the brain. The problem is it's not. A lot of these problems are actually from the waist down. And this was his handwriting his mother brought to me before, and he's 12 years old. You can't read it. And a lot of these kids have dysgraphia. This is one of the symptoms of kids who have learning disabilities and ADD. And we have 1 in 10 kids in this country on ADD medication. It's pretty frightening. And we basically cleaned up his diet. He was very malnourished. He had so many different nutritional deficiencies: magnesium, vitamin D, essential fatty acids, omega-3 fats, and B vitamins, and on and on. And his gut was a mess, and he was allergic to gluten and dairy, and he had lead in his system. So we just cleaned all that up. And after 2 months, his mother brought his homework back, and it looked like this. Now, when I saw this, I was like, oh my God, what happened here to this kid's brain? I didn't give him handwriting lessons, right? I basically just fixed his biology by getting him healthy, and his body naturally reset. So this is the power, and I've seen this in cases with all kinds of neurological diseases. So it's really about networks and systems and thinking. The way we think, for example, about diseases is wrong. For example, if someone comes into the office and they have they have sadness, helplessness, and low energy, and they don't want to eat, and they're not interested in sex, well, you go, well, they have depression, right? And then the psychiatrist will go, well, the reason you feel this way is you're depressed. Then you need an antidepressant. But depression isn't the cause of the symptoms, it's the name of the symptoms. And that's what happens in medicine. We confuse the name with the cause. So depression's not a Prozac deficiency. Okay, there's something else going on. Just like high cholesterol is not a Lipitor deficiency, or ADD is not a Ritalin deficiency, right? It could be because you're eating something like that bothers your gut, like gluten, or causes an autoimmune disease that can cause low thyroid, which can cause depression. Or it could be you're taking an acid blocker because of all sorts of things that are going on with your gut that you can easily fix that causes B12 deficiency. That can cause depression. Or maybe you don't get out much and you live inside and work inside and you have vitamin D deficiency, cause depression. Or maybe you've taken antibiotics that screws up your microbiome, cause depression. Or maybe you love tuna and you have mercury poisoning, which can also cause depression. Or you don't eat fish at all and you have omega-3 deficiencies, which can also cause it. Or you love sugar and you have Cinnabons and you have prediabetes or diabetes, which can also cause depression. So functional medicine is a way of navigating to answer these questions. When you go to a psychiatrist, they're not asking you about all this. They're not testing this. They're not looking at these things. But there's a whole new field of nutritional psychiatry. And just the same as one disease can have many causes, one cause can create many diseases. For example, gluten can cause depression, it can cause ADD and autism, can cause rheumatoid arthritis, osteoporosis, irritable bowel, inflammatory bowel, heart disease, cancer, and even dementia. I mean, it's rampant because it's not just a fad. It's rampant because we've done a lot to our food supply by changing the wheat we eat to have more gliadin and more reactivity. We have, again, C-sections, antibiotics, all kinds of things that have destroyed our gut, lack of fiber, processed food, and that leads to more reactivity. Now, this is George. George came to see me after a lecture, and he was about 300 pounds. He said, Dr. Hyman, can you help me? I said, sure, but you have to do everything I say. Now, most people don't. They pick and choose what they want to do. So I basically took him on as a patient, and he was one of those guys who just listened to everything. And so I changed his diet, got him eating whole foods, low glycemic foods, lots of fiber, lots of good fats, got him exercising a little bit, gave him some supplements, nothing fancy. And he had a lot of stuff. I mean, he had diabetes, he had hypertension, he had heart failure, he had reflux, he had enlarged prostate, he had low sex drive, he had swollen legs, he had sinus dripping, he pretty much had everything. He had a whole list of problems, which is actually why I call myself a holistic doctor, because I take care of people with a whole list of problems. And you know, you don't need a doctor for every inch of you. You just need to treat the system. And so we treated the system and not his symptoms. And we use this powerful drug, which is able to almost immediately change your gene expression, can optimize tens of thousands of protein networks, can balance dozens of hormones, can optimize your brain chemistry, can improve your microbiome almost instantly, is available to almost everybody on the planet, has no side effects, and is incredibly cheap. Do you know what it is? Water. It's food. It's food. And I mean real food. So food is the most powerful drug. As Gina said, it is more powerful than anything you can find in a prescription bottle. It works faster, better, and cheaper, and I'll show you. So we have to think of food not just as calories, which most of us do, calories in, calories out. That is just an outdated scientific model for weight loss, but it doesn't speak to what's in food, right? So food is information. It's like code that can upgrade or downgrade your biological software with every bite, that can reverse disease, that can make you feel great, that can optimize performance if you understand what to do. And it's pretty simple. So you want to eat a diet that's full of phytochemicals and plant foods. Not plant-based, but majority of your diet should be coming from lots of varieties of colorful plants. We used to eat 800 species of plants as a hunter-gatherer society. We've lost biodiversity in our food supply, so that we now eat basically 12 plants, and 60% is from 3, which is basically corn, soy, and rice. We need to eat a lot of good fats, avocados, olive oil, nuts and seeds, coconut, good omega-3 rich fish, really important. We all had the line sold to us that you had to eat a low-fat diet to lose weight and prevent heart disease. The government has completely overturned that old, outdated idea, which was based on pretty poor science, and has removed any restriction on dietary fat. We need good quality protein, and there's a lot of debate. Should you be a vegan? Should you eat beans and grains, or should you eat high-quality protein? I think, you'll see it a little bit when I'll talk about food. It's a mixture, and it matters what and where and what's coming from. And most of us are nutritionally deficient. 95% of us are deficient in one or more nutrients at the minimum level, whether it's vitamin D, omega-3 fats, magnesium, 45% of us. So this was George before, and this was George after at one of my book parties, and he lost 155 pounds. His last medical visit, he came in with a suitcase, and I'm like, what are you doing? He says, I just want to show you because I never could get nice clothes, and now he did a whole wardrobe thing, and and now he's running a bathhouse in New Mexico. This is Janice. Now, Janice came to see us at the Cleveland Clinic in one of our groups, and we'll talk about why groups are so important to change behavior. But Janice had heart failure, diabetes, she had kidneys starting to fail, liver was fatty and high liver function numbers, she had high blood pressure, lots of medications. She was on her way out. This is a year later. Within 3 days, she was off her insulin. Within 3 months, she was off her medication. Within a year, she lost 116 pounds and is completely different and off everything. And she saved herself on the co-pays of her meds $20,000 a year, which is incredible. Now, this seems to be going by itself. Is that because I'm going too slow? Somebody back there pushing the button? Now, let's talk about another disease which is on the rise, which is Alzheimer's. Now, who here knows someone who has Alzheimer's? Wow, just look around the room. It's a lot of people, a lot of people. This is something that's not inevitable, that there are genetic predispositions, but again, it's so influenced by what we do. And I've seen patient after patient whose cognitive symptoms have dramatically improved by using the systems approach. And now at Cleveland Clinic, we're starting a trial using functional medicine compared to conventional care at the Lou Ruvo Center in Las Vegas with the head of the Alzheimer's program there, Marwan Sabah. And we're hoping to show that by using this method, we can actually help see changes and reverse the symptoms of Alzheimer's and slow the process down. This is Dale Bredesen, who uses the functional medicine approach. He wrote this book. He's gotten a lot of flack for it, but I can share with you that that this methodology I've been using for 20 years, and I've had patient after patient who I've seen dramatically change their brain function, not just a little kid, but even people who are fairly far along. So a lot of people are affected. It's going to explode to 14 million within a decade. Globally, it's hundreds of millions. We've spent a lot of money, $226 billion. It's going to be about $1 trillion in a few years. This is an extraordinarily expensive disease, more than cancer or heart disease. We've spent literally billions of dollars on drug trials, billions of dollars. 99.6% have failed, and the ones that worked basically delayed nursing home by 3 months. Okay, it's a massive failure, and the reason it's a massive failure is that it's not just a single pathway like amyloid. It's related to these complex phenomena that are all affecting our brain. And what's really exciting is when I went to medical school, we were told you got your brain cells when you're born, that's it. Not true. You literally make brain cells up until the moment you die. You also have neuroplasticity, which is this idea that you can increase brain connections. You can actually rebuild brain linkages and improve the connectivity of your brain and function of your brain at any time. So the neurogenesis and neuroplasticity model gives us an opportunity to go, what affects the brain? And again, we use this same map. Now many of you probably have had a colonoscopy. I won't ask who, but many of you. But how many of you have had a cognoscopy? Probably none of you, which is a very in-depth look at all the variables that can affect your brain function, right? From your nutritional status, vitamin D, omega-3 fats, B vitamins, your hormone status, sex hormones, adrenal, thyroid, insulin, your immune status, infections, latent infections, like Chris Christopherson had Alzheimer's, quote unquote, but it turned out he had Lyme disease. Heavy metals, persistent toxins in the environment, mycotoxins, mold, all that affects your mitochondria. How are they working? What's going on with your microbiome in your gut? How's your sleep? That's really an important thing in brain function. What are your genetics that may predispose you that we can fix the expression of by doing the right things? For example, if you have the MTHFR gene, you're much more likely to get Alzheimer's, but if you take the right B vitamins, you actually can prevent that by improving the function of that gene. Just like the glutathione gene you can actually eat certain foods or take certain supplements that help optimize that pathway. And then, of course, neurocognitive testing, imaging, and spinal fluid. So these are how we look at these patients, and this is really just a basic functional medicine approach. And the problem is, you might have 36 holes in your roof. If you fix 3 of them, it's still going to rain in your house. So functional medicine is about finding all things. That first slide I talked to you about the multimodal, multifaceted approach, that network medicine. You can't just do one thing, right? You have to do all of it. So this is a woman who came to see me who had early dementia. She was on statin. She drank every night. Her mother had dementia. She had inflammatory things going on. She had a rash on her face, an autoimmune antibody. Her hair was falling out. She ate a lot of tuna and lots of dental fillings, and she had mold exposures. All these things are at risk in my mind because she's at risk for heavy metals, at risk for mold. She's got some inflammatory thing. She drinks wine, not necessarily great for her brain. Turned out when we analyzed all her stuff using the cognoscopy, we found she has hypothyroid. She had an autoimmune thyroid. She had adrenal issues, which are stress hormones. She had mercury toxicity, which was very bad. She wasn't able to detoxify. She wasn't able to methylate, which is an important B vitamin process. She had mitochondrial problems. She couldn't make energy. She had sensitivities to her food. She had bad bugs growing in her gut. And she had low-level autoimmunity, inflammation, and mold exposure. It's a long list, right? But functional medicine is about figuring out what to do first, second, third, how to actually correct these things. And it actually works. 6 months later, not only did she lose weight, but she was cognitively 10 years younger. Her son said it was like getting her mother back. She was bright, energetic. All her labs came back normal. Her metals were super high. And then we treated her over 2 years, and she got better. And then she did well for 5 years. Her husband died. It was a big stress. We found mold in her environment. We treated her. We gave her hyperbaric oxygen, IV therapy with glutathione. In 7 years, and she did really well. And then 7 years in, she got more confusion. We tried a ketogenic diet, and her clarity and orientation memory were returned. Now, this is a person who probably would have been in a nursing home in a couple of years. And to be able to delay that, now she's in her late 80s, is kind of a miracle. But it's not really a miracle. It's just good science. Now, there's another piece to this, which is how do we change? Because a lot of the things that I'm saying have to be done in a way that actually helps you to change your behavior, right? If I say take this pill, okay, that's a behavior change. You have to take the pill. But if I say I want you to eat this food, I want you to exercise, I want you to meditate, I want you to fix your sleep, I want you to build community and relationship. I mean, it's a lot to do for people, and a behavior change is really hard. So when I was doing functional medicine, I was very focused on the biology and not as much the behavior, because I could inspire people, they would do it, people were motivated, they came to see me. Then one day, the earthquake happened in Haiti, and I got a call, actually an email from one of my patients, and like everybody else, I was like, what can I do? I'm a doctor, can I go? The airports were shut down, it was chaos. And this patient emailed me, said, want to go to Haiti today? Now, normally I would ignore it, but he was a billionaire and had his own plane. So I was like, okay. So we got a bunch of people together, a couple orthopedic surgeons, a nurse anesthetist, ICU docs. We basically got everybody on the plane. We loaded it floor to ceiling. It was like a Gulfstream 5 with like medical supplies. Flew down there. We were the first group down there, and called Paul Farmer, who I had literally just read his a book about him called Mountains Beyond Mountains. And he was a guy who was a doctor from Harvard who went to Haiti 30 plus years ago, and he saw what was happening there with TB and AIDS in the poor communities there. And the public health community had given up on these people because they basically, were poor. They were the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. Most of them lived on less than $1 a day. And they didn't have clean water. The medication regimens were super complicated. And he's like, no, we can solve this problem. We use what he called accompaniment. We'll accompany each other to health. So he trained thousands of community health workers to go to each other's houses, to make sure they were taking their medicine, to get them clean water, to support them. And I realized that when I came back from Haiti, that chronic disease was also contagious. That it wasn't just this model doesn't just work for infections, but that you're more likely to be overweight if your friends are overweight than if your family is overweight. that your social networks are more important than your genetic networks in determining their health outcomes. Your zip code is more important than your genetic code in determining your health. You literally can take someone from a very low socioeconomic zip code, put them in a slightly better one, and their diabetes will get better and their weight will go down without doing anything else. So this is a huge problem in this country because we live in a place of apartheid. I work in Cleveland. I was in East Cleveland last week at the food bank, going to the local markets, and it's staggering the level of apartheid. I went to Rallies, which is like they don't even have McDonald's there because it's too high end. I'm not kidding. And have you heard of Rallies, anybody? I mean, I've never heard of Rallies, but it's what they put in these poor communities that who knows what the food is. You literally couldn't go in. They had a bulletproof glass you could order through. They would put the food through there. I mean, we were up there for 3 minutes. 2 crack addicts came in to talk to us. I mean, it was very disturbing. So we live in this country. Now, as I was thinking about this when I came back, I didn't know how to implement this because I realized we need to use the power of community to change behavior and the power of each other. I call it the love diet. And this guy walks in my office. You know who he is? Rick Warren, the pastor from Saddleback Church. He wrote The Purpose-Driven Life, which sold more books, nonfiction, than anything except the Bible. And he was very overweight, and he's like, look, can you help me? I want to get healthy. I'm like, sure. So after we went for dinner, and I said, tell me about your church. He's like, well, I got 30,000 people in my church. I'm like, wow, that's a big church. He's like, yeah, we have 5,000 small groups that meet every week to help each other live better lives. And I'm like, oh. I thought to myself, why don't we just hijack those groups and put in a healthy living program and I can test my experiment? And I didn't say that to him, but I said, why don't we put a healthy living program in the church? He's like, great idea, because last week I was baptizing my church, and after about the 800th one, I'm like, man, we're a fat church. And he says, and I'm fat, and we have to do something about it. So it was perfect timing, and we launched this program. We thought a few hundred people would sign up. It was called the Daniel Plan, after Daniel from the Bible who resisted the temptation of the king's rich food and was healthier for it. And we launched it into his church. It was the biggest event they'd ever had in history of the church. Bigger than the Obama-Cain debates, bigger than 9/11. There were 15,000 people that signed up the first week to do this together. We literally had to turn 2,000 people away that day. And they signed up to do this in small groups. And it was a curriculum that was developed by me and another physician. And basically, they did it themselves. They just did it themselves within their small groups. And Rick's like, all you have to do to have a group is to be a host. And that means you have to have a heart for people, open your home, serve food, and tell a friend, right? H-O-S-T. So, it was a little awkward as a Jewish doctor standing on the stage there with the cross there. My friend took a picture and he sent to my mother. And then we wrote this book called The Daniel Plan. I wanted to call it The Jewish Doctor's Guide to Christian Wellness. But that didn't go over so well. It actually ended up winning the Christian Book of the Year award. I think I'm the only Jew to ever win that. But there was this one other guy about 2,000 years ago. So anyway, it was #1 bestseller, and it's been launched in literally thousands of churches around the world. We have over 30 churches in Cleveland doing this. We developed a curriculum. It's a year-long curriculum for pastors and churches. It's just been an extraordinary journey, and people get healthy together. Getting healthy is a team sport. And this was Rick before and after. And we had, at 10 months, we had an event, and you can see people lost 90 pounds, 80 pounds, 135 pounds. Rick lost 50, and then the ones down here are 15, 30. These are like slackers over here. And it was powerful to see this. And I remember, just standing in the audience, just watching this, crying, thinking, this is so moving that we have to rethink how we do medicine. We have to change the way we do medicine, which is how we deliver healthcare, and the medicine we do, which is really systems medicine. This was Daniel and his wife, who he was rheumatoid arthritis. He was on pain medication. He was on like 15 pills. He was off work. Was 300 plus pounds. The wife yo-yo died her whole life. And after doing this together in community, this is what they look like. And there wasn't a doctor. There wasn't a health coach. There wasn't a nutritionist. There was nothing. Just people helping people, loving each other well. And I think that's really an important thing. So it's changing the way we do medicine and the medicine we do. All right, now I'm just going to give you a little brief kind of whiz through what to eat, and you're going to all get a chance to get the book out there. And basically, I've distilled everything I know about nutrition after 40 years of studying it into this book, and you'll hear it all in the next 5 minutes. So food is medicine, we went over that. People are confused about what to eat. You know, oatmeal's supposed to be healthy, not so much. Butter's supposed to be bad, not so much. Eggs are supposed to be bad, not so much. Meat is supposed to be bad, not really. In the right frame, we'll talk about that. Dairy, we're supposed to have 3 glasses of milk a day. I mean, these are all the advice we're getting, and it's like nutrition whiplash. Who's confused here about what you're hearing? It's hard to keep track. And part of that has to do with nutrition science, which really sucks because they study populations over long periods of time. So the one study that came out recently, you shouldn't eat eggs, they looked at people over 17 years. They asked them one questionnaire. They then saw if there was a correlation, and it was about a 17% increase in risk of heart disease if you ate eggs. But it's kind of meaningless because there could be a lot of other factors that explain it that aren't accounted for in the study. And any study that's a population study like that, you have to have like not a 17% increase, but like a 200% increase to even be meaningful. And in smoking, it was a 2,000% increase, right? Smoking and cancer. So, you know, cholesterol's bad, butter's good. It's like, oh my God, right? So I wrote this book, and in the fall, the cookbook's coming out, which is how to cook, what the heck should I cook, and a lot of great recipes and a lot of awesome pictures of me. This is what they called the book in the UK. I couldn't get my publisher to call it that here, but anyway, there you go. So what's the best diet for humans? What the heck should I eat? Well, should you eat this? Do you even know what it is? It's 37 ingredients of mostly not food except banana puree at the bottom. What is this? Can you tell me? I'll give you $100, whoever can tell me. Bread? It's Twinkies. It is a food-like substance. It is not food. Okay, what is this? Okay, I always say in the churches when I give a talk, I say it's really easy to know what to eat. You should leave the food that man made and eat the food that God made. Did God make a Twinkie? No. Did God make an avocado? Yeah. I also say, if Jesus came to dinner, what would you feed him? A Big Mac, fries, and a Coke? And they're like, no. So eat real food, right? And that's just stuff that is, you know, very short distance from seed to fork, right? If you can kind of map out the steps that it take to get to your table and where the ingredients came from, you probably can eat it. Now, there's a lot of confusion and a lot of arguments. You've got paleo on one side, vegan, you've got keto, low carb, low fat. I mean, it's enough to drive you crazy. I was sitting on a panel once with 2 friends of mine. One was a paleo doctor, and the other was a vegan cardiologist, and they were arguing, and I'm like, look, if you're paleo and you're vegan, then I must be pegan, and it was a joke. And then literally it's become a thing. It was in I wrote an article about it because I was like, wait a minute, they basically agree. We should all eat whole foods. We shouldn't eat processed foods. We shouldn't eat hormones, antibiotics, pesticides. We should eat lots of plant foods, nuts, seeds, vegetables, fruit. The only difference is, and they both agree we shouldn't eat dairy, but what we see is the difference is only should you eat beans or grains for your protein or animal protein. That's it. So I was like, okay, this makes a lot of sense. So I started to look at what are the principles of eating in a sane, rational way that includes the latest up-to-date science that are principles. It's not a diet, it's just principles that you can follow and stay pretty safe. The first is we are eating way too much sugar and starch. We eat 152 pounds of sugar, 132 pounds of flour per person a year. That's almost a pound a day per person per year. Now, I know I'm not having that much, so some of you out there must be having more. And sugar and starch are the driver of every age-related disease. Cancer, heart disease, dementia. I mean, they're calling Alzheimer's now type 3 diabetes. So this is the biggest scourge right now. It's not fat. It's the starch and sugar in our diet, and it's everywhere in everything. You want to eat a ton of vegetables, lots of non-starchy vegetables. Eat as much as you want. 8 to 15 cups a day is optimal. Fruit is great, but if you're diabetic, you want to eat less and not so sugary fruit. Lots of good fats. Omega-3, olive oil, nuts, seeds, avocados, lots of good fats. Even fats from animal fats are not as what we thought they were. We thought they were bad, and I go into that in the book. You don't want to eat a lot of processed oils. You don't want to have a lot of commercial dairy. You can have grass-fed goat or sheep. There's some A2 cows, which are great, which are a different casing. But most of the dairy wheat now has been hybridized. These cows that are all homogeneous, they're all the same. They have like 3 bulls fertilizing all the cows, and they're like literally all these Holsteins that have A1 casing, which tends to cause more allergies, irritable bowel, bloating, digestive issues, skin issues, eczema, has been linked to cancer, very inflammatory. So A2 casein is more of the original cows and the more of the original goat and sheep, which is better. If you can eat whole, fresh, local food, can't always do that. Animal food should be, I would change that word now to regenerative. Who here knows what regenerative agriculture is? Okay, here's the bad news. You know, the biggest driver of climate change is what? Fossil fuels? Food. The food system, end to end, from deforestation to soil erosion to the processing and packaging to the fossil fuels used in agriculture, refrigeration, all that stuff. There's a movement that's emerging called regenerative agriculture, which is about growing food and raising animals in a way that regenerates soil. Right now, the way we grow food, we deplete the soil. We have 60 harvests left, according to the UN. We have 80, according to Obama's report before he left office. Think about it. No soil, no food, no humans. Your grandkids might not have dinner. And we have to do something about it. And the reason we have that is because we have an extractive agriculture system that basically mines the earth for food instead of regenerating it. So you can regenerate soil. You can actually reverse climate change because soil is the biggest carbon sink on the planet, more than the rainforest. The droughts and floods we're seeing all over are because the soil can't hold water, it runs off, and we can actually hold 27,000 gallons per acre for every % of organic matter in the soil that you can create by regenerating soil using animals and plants integrated into an ecosystem. So I'll write a lot about this in my new book, but it's a huge issue. So we want to eat more regenerative, and there's more and more of that coming up. Low mercury fish, tuna, swordfish, halibut, Chilean sea bass, a lot of those big fish are full of mercury. You don't want to eat that. It's bad for your brain. Grains are fine, but they shouldn't be like 2 cups of grains. Half a cup is fine. Gluten grains are problematic, wheat in particular, oats, and then rye and barley probably okay, depending on where you get them. Beans are also fine. But again, some people don't tolerate them. And of course, who wants to have pesticides, antibiotics, hormones, chemicals, additives, preservatives, and GMO food? Probably none of us if we had a choice. The average person eats 3 to 5 pounds of food additives every year. That's a lot. And most of them are banned in other countries. So this is what we should be eating, food. And again, it's a powerful new drug that we can take advantage of. And this is my new book's coming out next year. And it really, for me, is the culmination of lifetime work because as a doctor, I'm like, what's making my patients sick? What's the root cause? Well, it turns out it's mostly food. Well, then I go, what's the cause of the food? What's the food system? Well, what's the cause of the food system? It's our policies and our businesses that are running this. There's probably maybe 24 CEOs that run the entire food and ag system that are making all the decisions for the rest of us. It's the biggest industry on the planet, over $15 trillion a year. And it's very poorly regulated, and people don't understand the impact on our health in terms of chronic disease, people are talking about Medicare for all. That's a disaster unless we figure out how to not get people sick in the first place, otherwise it's going to bankrupt us even further. Right now, by 2048, almost all of our federal tax revenue will be needed for Medicare. So we need to understand that we can actually fix these problems by understanding how food connects to all of them. And that's really what I began to understand is the most important work we need to do. Because if we want to solve our chronic disease issue, if we want to solve our economic crisis, if we want to solve social justice issues like I said, I mentioned East Cleveland, if we want to solve climate change, if we want to address environmental degradation that's causing dramatic loss of biodiversity and our water resources, 78% of our water is used for irrigation and for agriculture. This can all be fixed. These all have solutions, and I talk about them in the book. That's why it's called Food Fix, not Food Apocalypse. But we kind of are unless we get with it. So I really encourage you to start thinking about these issues, start learning about these issues. I have a lot of very amazing people and experts on my podcast, which you can get You just go to drhyman.com. You can find the podcast. You can go to iTunes or Google Play or wherever you get your podcast, Spotify. And of course, if you want to come see us, I'm the Ultra Wellness Center, Cleveland Clinic, and the Institute for Functional Medicine, essentially the academic group that teaches this model. So I'm happy to entertain any questions now that I've totally depressed and confused you. We have mic runners somewhere. So we have one young lady here. Well, I will repeat the question because I can hear you.
Right here. Hey.
So I live in San Francisco and here, and I tried to find functional medicine in San Francisco. I'm sure it's there.
Yeah.
I just can't find it.
Yeah, there are many functional medicine doctors. The quality varies. If you go to functionalmedicine.org or ifm.org, you can go on the Find a Doctor tab and you can see who's been certified. Now, certified doesn't necessarily mean competent, but at least they've been well educated, and it's a great place to start. Yes. Yes, you.
Spicy food.
What do I think of spicy food? I like spicy food.
Is it good for you?
Yeah, it's good for you. Spices are one of the most amazing things on the planet. And they were coveted. It was a spice trade, right? Because not only do they bring flavor to food, but they're full of these powerful things called phytochemicals, which regulate your biology. So for example, turmeric, which is in curries, upregulates all your detoxification system. It's an anti-inflammatory. Rosemary, again, is a powerful anti-inflammatory and it regulates your detox system. So these are really important to use in cooking, and I think, yes, spicy food is good. Oh gosh, so many people. Who's got the microphone? Yeah, right there.
Oh, hi. Can you speak to the studies that indicate there is potential for metformin to control inflammation beyond its function as a glycemic control?
Yeah, okay, so yes. She's asking about a drug that's a diabetes drug that's being promoted to be used for longevity and for long-term health. And as I mentioned briefly, the biggest driver of aging is sugar and starch, period. And if you could do one thing to dramatically improve your health, it would be to dial that way back. I love sugar. We're programmed to love sugar. Everybody loves sugar. It's actually something we were able to get in rare amounts, and when we did, we'd eat as much as possible so we would store fat in our belly for the winter. The problem is we just keep eating all winter, And I think that if you begin to understand the power of that and the role of good fats and the need for a decrease in sugar and starch, you're going to get far more benefit than taking a drug like metformin. I'm going to have so many patients on metformin who are diabetic, like that lady who was, 250 pounds, who lost 116 pounds. She lost 43 pounds and reversed her diabetes in 3 months. In 3 days she was off her insulin. So, I'm okay with using medication. I just think it kind of misses the point. If you don't fix the food, it's kind of like, putting kerosene on a fire to try to put it out. Yeah.
I have autoimmune problems.
Autoimmune problems, yeah.
I've read a number of books, and a few of them talk about nightshade vegetables.
Yeah.
What do you think about
Okay, so there's a whole conversation, which she's talking about as a class of foods that's been linked to arthritis. Nightshades, potatoes, tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, which seems a shame to not eat those things because I like them. But there's a conversation and research around something called lectins, which are proteins in food that, in the context of a leaky gut, a damaged gut, can create inflammation in the body. So my answer to people is you can avoid the foods or you can fix your gut. And that's a whole other conversation, but there's a great science to actually optimizing the microbiome. And it can work very quickly. And so many people have digestive systems that aren't optimal, even if they don't have symptoms. If you do a stool test, we can look at the microbiome, and you can actually alter it by doing various things to help fix that. So autoimmune disease, I often start with the gut, start with diet, and then look for other things like heavy metals or infections like tick infections and so forth. But I don't think that everybody should be off lectins or off nightshades. But it's worth a try. You can do it for a month and see how you feel. Anybody else? Woo. Okay, let's see. We're going to be here till about midnight, but I'm good with that. Yeah.
Well, number one, I thought your presentation was terrific. One of the things that I'm personally concerned about is being proactive. I don't want to be one of those 300-pound people. So I'm very interested in a set of metrics, a dashboard, if you wish, that I can assess where I am on the factors that you looked at. So I have a scorecard. Does the Cleveland Clinic offer a diagnostic evaluation where you can get a set of metrics?
Yes, so there is an executive health program there, but it's pretty standard. And then in the Center for Functional Medicine, we do this, but I actually treat people, like I said, I just saw a whole bunch of elite athletes from Real Madrid and looked at all their scorecard. In other words, looked at their hormones, looked at their nutrition levels, looked at their microbiome, looked at the foods they were reacting to, looked at heavy metal levels. I mean, I just looked at everything so I could get a sense of, where were they needing to be tuned up. So functional medicine isn't so much about treating a disease, it's about where are you deviating from optimal health and getting this scorecard. So I think, yes, functional medicine does that. I've done this for decades. I think, if you came to see one of our docs at Cleveland Clinic and wanted to do that, you certainly could. Where do you live? Okay. I think there might be functional medicine doctors here, but it depends on who's here and what you can do. But
I don't have any problem going to Cleveland. I've gone to La Jolla, to Human Longevity, to do
you did the Craig Venter thing?
Yeah, but I was primarily interested in the whole body MRI evaluation, which I had a set of interesting results, and I was able to make a major turnaround in my health based on having a set of metrics.
That's great. From the MRI or from the other stuff?
From the MRI.
Yeah, that's good. So, Craig, I know him well, and I was consulting with them a lot because they would provide all this wealth of data from the human nucleus, which measured all these metrics. They didn't do a lot of the stuff that I would sort of do, but people would leave there and kind of don't know what to do, and so they would send them to me to kind of put it all together. And I think that's part of the problem is there's too much data and not enough knowledge. And that's what functional medicine is. It's a filter. It's a set of lenses that you can look at all the data and make sense of it. Yeah. Oh.
When you talk about the microbiome, what are the tests other than like H. pylori? Like, what are the tests used for the microbiome?
So there are a lot of different tests out there. There's companies that are doing stool testing and looking at the microbiome in extensive ways. I like to look at the function as well as the microbiology. Right? So, and you can tell a lot what's going on in the microbiome by looking at various things that we check. So we look at, for example, we do a stool test. It's called GIFX. There's a lab called Genova that does it. There are other labs that do similar tests. And we look at the pancreatic elastase, which looks at your digestive enzymes. We look at whether you're absorbing things well. So we can look at absorption through looking at different fecal fats. We're looking at inflammatory markers. We're looking at your immune system in the gut. We're looking at what we call short-chain fatty acids, which are the good fats that are the fuel for your colon that are produced by healthy bacteria. And we see very low levels of those in certain patients. We look at the DNA, or we call the RNA of the microRNA, which we look at in the microbiome, and we can actually tell whether you have more or less of this or that one. For example, Akkermansia is one that's really important for your immune system, for your biofilm, and people with autoimmune disease or cardiometabolic diseases or even cancer have very low levels of this, and you can fix it by giving, for example, polyphenols, which are basically from green tea or pomegranate or cranberry that help these bacteria grow. So prebiotics, polyphenols, probiotics, all these things, fiber, all help to grow a healthy microbiome. But yes, you can look at it. And again, we're just at the infancy. I've been looking, they used to call me Dr. See Every Poop at the last place I worked because I wanted to look at everybody's stool tests because I've probably seen 20,000 of them. And you just learn so much of what's going on with people, and then you can modify that to fix it.
Which test do you
I like
recommend?
the test called GIFX, EFFECTS. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Biome? Viome? Yeah, Viome, it does a great microbiome test. I think, the challenge is that, the science needs to catch up with the testing, right? 0 minutes remaining. Can I keep talking? One last question. Okay, you in the front.
Podcast, you were talking with Chris Kresser, and you talked about people that have a passion and really want to become advocates and get themselves involved. Can
Yes.
you tell us some ways for those of us who want to be involved and get the word out and help other people and help functional medicine become the way? You know, what can we do?
Great question. I've got an hour. I mean, literally, that's what my Food Fix book is about. And just the cliff notes on that is, you know, we have 3 different levers, and then there's philanthropy, maybe 4 levers. So your personal choices, decisions in your life make a difference, right? You know, food waste accounts for, 40% of our food is wasted. It's the 3rd biggest contributor to greenhouse gases as a country. If it were a country, if it were a country, it would be the 3rd biggest contributor to greenhouse gases after U.S. and China. So you can compost, for example, as a simple thing you can do personally. You can grow a garden. You can choose regenerative food to stimulate the market. Those are simple things you can do yourself. You can vote with your fork, but you can also vote with your vote. For example, the Food Policy Action Network has a list of every single congressman and senator and how they vote on food and ag issues. There's $500 million that's spent by lobbyists on the Farm Bill alone. 75% of the Farm Bill is food stamps, or SNAP, which is 75% of that is processed food, and 10%, or $7 billion a year, is soda. So they do not, I mean, Coca-Cola's, one of their major source of revenue, 20% of their American revenue is from food stamps. Think about it. So vote with your vote, and find candidates who want to talk about these issues, find people who care about them. In your local community, you can do it. San Francisco, for example, enacted a mandatory composting law. You know, France, it's illegal. You go to jail if you throw your waste out. Seriously. So looking at innovative businesses that you can develop. I mean, for example, someone developed a business that helps reduce food waste by turning waste into energy, for example, or a process of covering vegetables in a coating that's made from the same stuff that the coating is made from, but it's like an extra layer that protects the food and reduces food waste by 50%. So businesses can do that, and really focusing on the policy side is really important. So that's hard because you've got the Citizens United, which makes corporations people, and you've got dark money funding most of the elections in this country, and then you've got the Russians, and it's even worse. So, I mean, it's scary. So. Anyway, really, it's a pleasure to be here and talk to you. Hope I get to talk to you again. And I'll see you next time. And I guess I'll be signing books somewhere back there, so you can ask me more questions.